Hi, I'm Edwin Gutier. I'm the manager of young adult engagement for United Way Worldwide, and I'm joined today by Brian Pham and Adam Cox, and they're here to talk to me a little bit about Break a Difference. But first, let's try and get to know them a bit. So, if you guys could introduce yourselves, your title, and your favorite guilty pleasure song, then we'll go ahead and get into the questions after that.
Ooh, that's a good one. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Cox, and I'm the Director for Volunteer Programming at Break a Difference. And I'd have to say that my guilty pleasure song is probably Brick House by the Commodores. My roommate and I were talking this morning about a live performance that they're having this summer, and the song's just been in my head.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, I am Brian Pham, and I am the Director of Operations for Break a Difference. And I can't think of a specific song right now, but I like any song that kind of just makes your shoulders bounce while you're driving in the car. So anything that that has a heavy bass to it.
Nice, nice. I'm going to go ahead and say "Party in the USA" is yours because I feel like you'd be riding out to that all over Baltimore.
only the Miley Cyrus and Biggie remix, only that one.
Gotcha, love it. All right, so you both mentioned Break a Difference. Can you tell me a little bit about Break a Difference? What is it? When did it start?
So Adam, myself, and our boss Steve McMahon and another colleague Joe McMahon are all co-founders. And Break a Difference essentially is a nonprofit that creates immersive volunteer experiences for people to, take a break, make a difference. And, immersive service for us is really kind of building community typically in a short amount of time. So that could be a day where we have a group of college volunteers or a company, and we only have 4 to 6 hours with them. Or that could be an entire week where we have, 5 days of college students that have their attention and just focusing on building community while making sure that they make a positive impact. So that's kind of what we are.
We got our start. I'd say the idea sort of was planted about 6 or 7 years ago, following the alternative spring break experience that Brian and I had. That Steve put on, and ever since then we've kind of had this pipe dream about how can we take this and grow it and give this experience to other college students across the country and other corporate employees and companies. How can we get them involved in doing the amazing work that we have the opportunity to do? So over the years we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, and it's only been within the last couple of years that we've really started to build something, and we're really excited about where we're going.
That is awesome. So can you both tell me a little bit about your first alternative spring break so many years ago?
You want to go first, Adam?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Adam and I actually attended our first alternative spring break, just 3 months after Hurricane Katrina. And United Way and MTV had a partnership at the time. Or the beginning of their partnership where they were promoting a week of service, alternative spring break, down in the Gulf Coast. And, I saw it on MTV at 2 o'clock in the morning, and by 4 o'clock in the morning, my application was done online. So we flew into New Orleans proper, and we spent our first couple nights staying in Biloxi. And I actually spent most of my spring break in Foley, Alabama, volunteering, rebuilding a roof, actually, first-story roof, for an entire week for a family that had been living in a FEMA trailer for 2.5 years after Hurricane Ivan. I believe it was a grandmother and 3 grandchildren. And soon after. A couple months after our alternative spring break, her and our family actually got to move back in, so that was a pretty powerful.
That is awesome.
To be a part of that.
Yeah, my spring break experience was the exact same as Brian's, and the way that I got involved was almost identical. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was up typing a paper that was probably due the next day, and I saw the ad on MTV, and literally a couple hours later they had my application, and Brian and I had the fortunate opportunity to be a small 89 of like 3,000 applicants. It was really quite neat, and we traveled down to the Gulf Coast, and I spent the week working on gutting houses because there were still so many houses that hadn't been touched.
Mm.
Literally emptying out houses, preparing them for folks to come in to insulate and sheetrock so people could move back in. And it was pretty incredible because, the first day that we were down there, they took us on a tour, and I remember being in this empty lot with a group of other people, and they were pointing out different things, and I looked down at my feet, and I noticed that I was standing on ceramic tile, and I looked around and I saw outlines of things on the ground, and I asked, what was it? And they told me that we were standing in the middle of a gas station that had literally just been wiped right off the map. It no longer existed, and it was at that moment that I feel like something just burst in my brain, and I had this realization of like, oh my God, this is real for a lot of people. This was very, very real, and that was the beginning of what has been for both Brian and I a multi-year experience, just continuing to do this work.
That is awesome.
Do you remember? Do you remember when I believe it was Steve and maybe a few other United Way representatives when we went to go see that bridge that had been collapsed?
Oh my God! It looked like a pile of dominoes. Literally,
yeah.
Bridge probably half a mile long, connecting over this bay, and the pillars were all there, but the sections of road in between had collapsed, and so it was literally collapsed section of bridge after collapsed section of bridge. It was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable.
Oh my gosh! So tell me about like what it meant to each of you to be a part of bringing people home from that kind of devastation to putting families back into their houses.
For me, that first alternative spring break was I had volunteered through high school here and there, but I had never been a part of anything so immersive in an environment or community that I wasn't involved, where the stakes and the emotions are very high because it's 3 months after the storm. So for me, that experience to be a part of, to know that me and four other United Way Alternative Spring Break volunteers literally built this roof in 1 week, and to know that that's probably the same roof that she has on her house today. I think about it a lot, and it reminds me that a week of volunteering can really, really make a big impact. So it makes me feel good thinking about it.
Yeah, to echo Brian, for me it was, I had grown up in a relatively small town, and my world didn't expand much beyond my social network and school that I went to and the handful of places that I had traveled on vacation. And I came down here really on my first trip as an adult. I guess I was just over 18. My first trip as an adult somewhere by myself, and being surrounded by a group of other young people who, like me, had committed to doing something with their spring break, and being able to share that experience with them, and the work that we did, and seeing the way that we were actually really able to make a difference in someone's life. And it wasn't just theoretical, and we weren't just talking about it, we were actually doing it. We were moving boards. One of the projects that we did during my week was there was an elderly woman who had a demolished shed in her backyard that wasn't her shed. It had come from somewhere else in the neighborhood, and we literally, in an afternoon, had taken it out of her backyard, and it had been there since the storm. And she had no access to her backyard, and it was just really powerful to really actually be able to do something and see the difference that we were making.
That's amazing. Yeah. So aside from the joy of helping people return home, you two became friends at ASB, or did you guys know each other before you went out there?
It's funny because our spring break, we were in two different camps, two different locations, a couple hours apart, and so we had spent a little bit of time on the day we arrived and a little bit of time during closing ceremonies at the end of the week. And it wasn't until the following year when United Way had invited us both back to help coordinate and run the alternative spring break for 2007 that we really got to know one another. And it's one of these things that I don't think either one of us will ever forget. We actually drove from Washington, D.C. down to Biloxi, Mississippi nonstop there at the beginning of the month. And
in my little two-door Saturn.
To the gills. And you know, Brian can tell you a little bit about our living situation when we were down there, and what just an awesome experience it was, and the foundation of what's going to continue to be a lifelong friendship.
You know, what Steve McMahon, the person that led the efforts at United Way that first year when we were volunteers, he had taken that 1 week of alternative spring break and turned it into 4 back-to-back weeks of March, so that it could engage different college students and young adults depending on when their spring break was. And so Adam and I went down as these coordinators, and so we were down on site for about 6 or 7 weeks, and you know, living and you know, handing out the United Way Kool-Aid week after week, and you know, providing the same experience that we had in 1 week that was really intense and changed our lives forever. And we were doing it for 4 back-to-back weeks. So that entailed, you know, opening, closing ceremonies. That entailed 5 days of service. You know, 5 different social activities every evening. Hearing dozens, hundreds of stories of volunteers. You know, their first time, you know, swinging a hammer. Their first time seeing the ocean. Their first time flying anywhere. It was just, I mean, it was really, you know, when Adam and I kind of reminisce and think back, I mean, it was really, it seems like it was a dream.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so perfect, and nothing about it I would change.
No. Getting to watch people's eyes light up and getting to see the transformation that takes place in the students from, you know, day one when they arrive, and some of them come by themselves, some of them come with groups of other college students, and you know, some of them are a little apprehensive, like, what am I getting myself into? You know, what's this experience going to be like? And then Friday, everybody's hugging each other and exchanging email addresses, and you know, already scheduling reunion tours when they're all going to get back together. It's really quite amazing. It's really quite amazing.
That's awesome. So you both heard about the advertisement on MTV. I'm assuming you knew about MTV prior to ASB. Had you ever heard of United Way before you volunteered?
For me, it's actually kind of a funny story. Again, you know, I actually had thought that I knew about volunteering because I did a handful of it throughout high school. I was one of those people that, you know, had double the amount of volunteer hours that were required to graduate. But when I saw the MTV ad and I applied, I'm not sure that I saw that United Way was a part of it because I didn't know to look for it and I didn't know that it existed. And it was, you know, throughout the week of my alternative spring break, I learned a lot more about what United Way is, what it does, that this long-term rebuilding was only one small portion of what it did. But a couple of weeks after my alternative spring break experience, a few of the United Way representatives invited me to speak to a few other United Way folks about my life-changing experience. And they were like, yeah, you can come down to the United Way office. It's in Alexandria, Virginia. And very naively, I said, there's a building, you guys have an office. You know, I was 18, 19 years old. I had no idea, and little did I know that same office I'd be working in as an intern for a year. No, a year after that.
That is awesome.
Yeah, my experience with United Way, I obviously knew a lot about MTV. You know, I was in college. It's probably all I watched back then. But as far as United Way went, I knew that in my hometown there was always a thermometer in front of the city hall every year with dollar amounts on it. So I was like, okay, United Way raises money, and then they make a thermometer. But what I found out during my week of ASB is that it's this huge organization that does amazing work in communities across the country, and it was through that I met some really great folks at United Way, and they offered me an internship that following summer. So, I moved down to Washington, D.C. thinking, hey, I'll be down here for 2 months, have an internship, and go back to my life in New York. And I ended up staying down there for almost 4 years and working with United Way in a variety of capacities during that time, both as part of Alternative Spring Break and in some other capacities. And, I'm obviously no United Way expert, but I know that they're way more than just raising money, and that the work that they do around, creating advocates for community issues, getting people involved in volunteerism, and obviously still, raising money and funding agencies that are doing good work in communities across the country. It was an amazing learning experience, and I'm really happy, and I know that we're still very happy to be involved with United Way to continue to do this alternative spring break work, with them in all the communities that we're working in.
Which is a perfect transition. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with Break a Difference in United Way this year?
Yeah, so we're working with 7 local United Ways across 5 different cities, in addition to, of course, the United Way headquarters, United Way for Worldwide. And we're organizing 5 different alternative spring breaks, one in Baltimore, one in D.C., Newark, New Jersey, along the Jersey Shore, and the San Francisco Bay Area. We have about 700 volunteers, a little bit more, volunteering for the entire month of March, each for about a week. And we're focusing on different issues. So, in Baltimore, we're focusing on family stability. That involves sending volunteers out to community kitchens, homeless shelters, community programs. A couple of the days where building elevated gardens for a local school in Brooklyn, Baltimore, where they teach nutrition education, and the food will be given out to their pantry that they run out of their school to families that need the food. In DC, Newark, and San Francisco Bay Area, we're promoting and helping with childhood education, assisting with after-school programs, preschool programs, helping kids do their homework, having anywhere between 30 to 80 college students, put into a after-school or preschool program, it doubles, triples, quadruples the adult to kid ratio. So we're able to provide a little bit more hands-on educational experiences with them. And then, of course, the Jersey Shore, we're rebuilding homes in communities that were damaged by Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy was a little bit over a year ago, and we will be doing this for 10, 15 years to come, helping rebuild homes that were damaged by specifically Hurricane Sandy. And it's going to be a long time. So doing these alternative spring breaks and working with the local United Ways there is going to be a long partnership for years to come.
Yeah, the reason why United Way is such a great partner in these types of programs is that they really have the finger on the pulse in each community of what are the issues that need support and that need to be addressed. And we've been strategic about the social issues that we've addressed, and we feel like we've created some really amazing programs that the student volunteers can really get their hands on and really get connected to. And so what's been really cool about our program, all of our programs this year, is that they were really kind of birthed from a program that we started in Newark about 4 years ago, that it was really just 2 weeks with the United Way of Northern New Jersey. We were in a Boys and Girls Club, and we thought, let's bring some college students in to work with kids in their after-school program. And it was only 24 students over 2 weeks, and now 4 years later, we're in 5 cities. We've got over 700 volunteers. We're addressing a few different social issue areas, and our goal really is every year to increase the number of cities we're in, increase the number of college students we're engaging, increase the number of families that we're helping get back into homes, increasing the number of kids whose after-school program experience we're helping, we're really trying to take college students and help them do some really meaningful things, and United Way really helps us do that.
That's awesome, and we're so lucky to partner with you guys. You guys are amazing at what you do. Got to experience it last year at the Jersey Shore with MTV. Pretty amazing watching what happens when you give a student a hammer or some power tools.
Well, and it's not all work at Alternative Spring Break, right? There's that part where we mentioned building community, and while volunteer service and making a positive impact is a huge part of that, it's this what do you do in your after hours where you get these college kids and students and participants talking and having a good time so that they have this overall experience that is well balanced and something that they've never had before. So in Baltimore, one of the weeks we're sending the Baltimore and DC Alternative Spring Break volunteers to the Baltimore Aquarium. We're going to have the closing ceremony where we celebrate and reflect on the entire week. Throughout each week for the Baltimore and DC program, they're going down to Capitol Hill where they'll have a few guest speakers speak to them. Something that many people have not been to DC. A lot of our volunteers, and for them to go to Capitol Hill and have guest speakers, that's going to be something that they never forget about. The United Way of Central Maryland is going to help us facilitate a program called Walk a Mile, and Walk a Mile essentially is this role-playing activity where it gets the volunteers to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, that's experiencing poverty in different ways. It could be a single mother with 3 kids. It could be a family, both have jobs, both college educated, but barely making it by. And it's this cool role-playing activity that all the participants will be able to go through because not many people think about all of the things that poverty is and how many different types of people it affects. So these fun activities, sending people to New York City for the first time, sending them to San Francisco, DC, letting them simply explore, will be the fun aspects of the Alternative Spring Break program that will help, round out their experience.
Awesome. So this wouldn't be a real ASB conversation without some volunteer reflection. So start with low point for your ASB career and high point for ASB career. Always want to end on a high.
Well, I would have to say that I think my low point is that the work that we do right now is only a couple of times a year. We're really busy, and we're engaging tons of people in March for Alternative Spring Break, and we're going to be engaging hundreds of more during Summer of Service, which is essentially the same thing, only in summertime. But our goal really is in the next few years to really increase our capacity and increase the different types of break programs that we're offering, whether it be single-day events with college students or companies, to fall break, to winter break, and really getting into other communities, throughout the country, because there's need everywhere, and the more that we can do to create opportunities for people to get involved in those communities, like United Way tries to do, create advocates, create volunteers, create donors. And that's really what these programs do, is in any of those 3 ways, we engage college students and encourage them to do that and to continue to do that, not just for 1 week in March, but for the other 51 weeks of the year.
And highs?
Oh, wow, that was a long low. The high for me is getting to see other young people see the lights come on the way that the lights came on for me during my first Alternative Spring Break. And one of the things I always say is that although there are those rare instances where we change the trajectory of or one of our programs changes the trajectory of someone's life, Brian and I are a good example of that. That's really not what we try to do. What we try to do is infuse a sense of service and community-mindedness into whatever it is they decide to do. If they want to be a doctor, that they're a community-minded doctor. If they want to be an accountant, that they're a community-minded accountant, and that service is a part of their life, not just for 1 week of the year, like I said, but it becomes a part of who they are. And these programs tend to facilitate that.
For me, my lows and highs. So my low would probably be that we didn't start this program 20 years ago. But I don't think I could have done it when I was 7 years old. um, so, the experience that we had back in 2006, 2007, my low would be that we did not work with the United Ways and create Break a Difference then. But I also recognize that we needed the years of experience. We were just we were kids, and we needed and we still do need more experiences so that we can continue to develop a program that will be everlasting. My high would be is that we're doing it. We created Break a Difference. We're a nonprofit, and we're working with 7 United Ways this year. Hopefully, that's 30 United Ways next year. For us to be able to, local United Ways are focusing on so many different issues, right? They're supporting hundreds, millions, thousands of nonprofits locally, internationally, globally, and for us to be this growing nonprofit that's able to, expand the capacity of these local United Ways to engage, these college students and young adults in, a different way, to create advocates in a different way, is something that I think will continue to be my high as long as I continue to do this.
Awesome. All right, so that's the last question I've got. Anything else for the good of the order?
I mean, there are still opportunities for folks to get involved even this March. So, if you or somebody is interested in getting involved in one of our programs, you can check us out at breakadifference.org or at liveunited.org/ASB. There are opportunities still available in all 4 weeks in all 5 cities. And keep an eye out, because there's some stuff going on this summer that's really exciting along the Jersey Shore, and we've got some really cool opportunities for folks to do some amazing work.
To keep it ASB style, we did our highs and lows. I'd love to do a couple shout outs. I like to shout out to those people early on in my nonprofit career before it was a career. People like Steve McMahon, Tracy Holmes, Randy Punley, Nicole Gantz, and the others that made sure that I had this life-changing United Way experience, and that it was the jumping platform for my now 7-8 years nonprofit career. When I was selling real estate 8 years ago. And I'm going to continue doing this. So a big shout out to those folks. A big shout out to all the folks this year that's helping us do these alternative spring breaks, all the Boys and Girls Clubs, all the local United Ways, and of course you, Edwin, over there at United Way Worldwide, helping make this happen, make this national, making sure that we're connecting all of the dots. So big shout out to you.
I appreciate it, but this wouldn't be happening without you two. So thanks so much for everything you're doing, and thanks for